In this video here, we're going to introduce you to some functionalities of RStudio. So RStudio is a user interface that allows you, the user, and the programming language R to interact. Right, so to begin, when you log on to RStudio, your screen should look something like what you see on the screen right now. It should consist of 4 fields or windows, and we will walk you through some of the features and some description of what these pieces mean. So the first thing we're going to work on is the top left window here, which is the script window. And this is where all the scripting is done. Right? If for some reason the script window is not visible on your screen, don't panic. What you can do is you can go to File, New File, and Script, and that should open the script window up for you. But as I mentioned a few seconds ago, this is where you will enter the code that you want RStudio to run. So let's start with something basic. Let's say we want RStudio to compute 12 plus 13. So what I did in the script file here, I typed in 12 plus 13. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this, and I'm going to run this piece of code here. So I'm going to run the selection. And if you see it down here in the console window, RStudio took our code 12 plus 13 and it computed 25. Right, so the 1 here is not necessary. It just means that RStudio, the output was 1 number. All right, so again, what we did here is we selected the code and we hit run. This run button is probably the most important part of RStudio, so much so that there will be a slightly longer video dedicated to this process here. But really, what this run button does is it sends the relevant code down to the console window. And the console window, which is the second piece, is this window below here. And the console window is where the calculation itself takes place. So before we go any further, I would like to point out that you could actually directly input your code into the console window. Right? For instance, if I wanted to compute 12 plus, let's say 14 this time, I could type in 12 plus 14 and hit enter, and you would get 26. So you might be asking, hey, why don't we always type in stuff into the console window rather than writing a code and running? So the reasons are twofold, because once the codes start getting slightly longer, corrections in the console windows can be much more difficult to make. All right, so if you want to change some things, it's a lot more difficult. So that's why experimentation generally takes place in the script window here. And secondly, the script window helps us stay fairly organized. All right, so what is the console window? Console window is where the computations are done. So you type in the operation you want RStudio to carry out, you hit enter. For instance, another example would be if I wanted to find the square root of 47, I hit square root of 47, hit enter, and that gives me the value. So there are some extremely useful features that are built into RStudio that will be extremely helpful for us to be familiar with. The first such feature is the code completion using the tab button. Right, so the basic idea is that using the tab key kind of allows you to autocomplete or search for files, functions, data, and much, much more. So for instance, I go into the window here, into the script window, and let's say I want to figure out how I would find the square root. So I could type in SQ, and if I hit tab followed by the SQ button, it kind of gives me a list of functions, data, files, all information that start with SQ. So I could kind of go in all the way there, find the SQRT, and hit enter. So it helps us kind of find files, functions, data, and much, much more. So as I said, this tab will become your best friend. All right, so let's get rid of it. All right, so the second kind of feature built into RStudio that can be quite useful is that RStudio actually records your command history, which means you can kind of scroll up and down the history of like executed commands using the up or down keys. To do this, you will need to ensure that you're in the console window. So I'm going to go to the console window, and if I hit up, it's going to walk me through the code that I ran before. If I hit up again, the one before that, and if I hit up once again, is the one before that, and if I down, it kind of cycles through the list of executed commands. And you can do that using the up or down key. You will need to ensure that you're in the console window to do this. All right, so that's the second thing. And third thing is it's nice to have a clean console window, and you can clear your console window either by pressing this sweep button here or using the shortcut, which is Control L. Right, so if I had Control L, it will clear everything. And if I clear it by accident, let's say I want to retrieve the last code, I can hit up. And even though it clears the console there, it still kind of records the command history. Right, so console window is where the computations take place. So the third thing here is this environment. Let me clear mine here. Is this environment window here on the top right, as well as the history, connections, and tutorial. All right, so in the environment window, you can see all the values and objects that you have stored in your workspace. For instance, what I'm going to do is, environment, I'm going to go ahead and take these two pieces of code here, and I'm going to run. All right, so now what I have is I have values, x is equal to 113, and y, which is the list of numbers 1, 2, and 3. So I can see that values that I defined show up in my environment history. Right, so x is 113 and y is 123. For y, not only does it show us a list of numbers, it tells us kind of what type of values are stored, so they're numeric values, and how many there are. Right, so when we store certain values and objects into our workspace, they show up here in the environment. One useful thing that I'd like to point out, even though I'm not going to go into much more detail on it right now, is this import dataset button here. All right, so this will allow us to import data from other sources in different various forms, from Excel, from SPSS, and so forth. So we're going to get some practice doing that later on when the data we're trying to import is outside of the server. The next up is the history window. And in this history window, you will see all the codes that you have run previously. Right, so as you can see, some of the recent ones here, I ran y, x, square root, so they show up right here. And if for some reason you wanted to kind of rerun a particular line or a chunk of code that you had hit before, you can just select the line. So let's say I want to go to square root of 47. I'm going to double click or hit select and hit enter. And as you see, it shows up in the command window. I can hit enter and it gives me the value of square root of 47. So the history window kind of shows you all the codes you have run previously. And it also allows you to kind of pick out a particular line or chunk of code. So I could pick out a chunk here, hit enter. As you can see, all three of those codes show up in the command window. And now when I hit enter, it runs all three of those. All right, so the history window consists of all the codes that you've run previously. And finally, we are going to look at the files, plots, and packages, which is the bottom right-hand corner. And there's some really, really important features here. Files kind of shows you information on the files you have saved. Plots, if you were to graph something, this is where the plots would appear. And packages, but there will be a separate video dedicated to some of these functionalities. All right, so we have the script window, we have the console window, we have the environment history window, and then this bottom right here that contains file, plots, and packages. All right, so hope you feel a little bit better about RStudio window, and hope this little demonstration has you eager and excited to learn more about the capability of RStudio.